I want you to read to the audience 5 specific categories and tell them the actual number. What is the current U.S. national debt right now?
So the U.S. national debt, 33,476,370,900,000. Oh, 371 billion.
And
That's
if
the
you compare that to the median income, what is that?
Okay. So your median income now is $36,046. Your median income in 2000, which is listed right below it, was $32,028. That's a difference of
Almost $4,000.
$4,020,
Mm-hmm.
$4,018. And so if you look right next to it, a new median home is 430,000. It's a little less, but 430,000. And in 2000, a median home was 167,000. I don't know how, if you're making $36,000, you're supposed to buy a $400,000 home. And if you go next to the national debt, you have your debt per citizen and your debt per taxpayer. Your debt per taxpayer is 200. If they were to call in their bet slips right now, every American taxpayer would owe $258,022. Who makes that?
I
Who?
feel you say that's the debt for each person?
That's the taxpayer. The debt per citizen, if you were to every kid, woman, child, whatever, is 99,718.
Mm.
So you got $100,000 for everyone, and over $200,000 for the people that are actually paying taxes.
And
And
what is the actual U.S. federal spending as we speak?
right now we're at 6,122,254,000. Yeah,
And
6.1 trillion.
and tell the audience where you're getting this information from.
This is usdebtclock.org. If you are an independent or a libertarian or even Green Party, you may have heard of this website even 20, 30 years ago. This is the national debt clock. It's posted on Wall Street, right out in the open, hidden in plain sight. And it very clearly illustrates how our taxes are not covering our spending, which is bad. I mean, that put it simply, frankly. And there's no reason to be running at a deficit and racking up debt, even if money is fake, which it is, but we should still use it. Because the mental drain and inflation and just the lack of the middle class in general,
Mm-hmm.
it's just dumb. There shouldn't be a deficit ever, especially if we're doing things like, let's see, if you add the interest to the defense budget, you're actually, let's see, you got 700, 800 billion. You have the entire deficit if you add the interest and debt and just defense. You can leave Social Security and Medicare out of there, which is what our taxes should be paying for. So, and those should be at a surplus, but that's a whole other thing. But yeah, so I mean, your whole deficit, you pretty much just get rid of right there,
Okay,
or
so
reallocate it. And then
you're
you've got,
getting to a question that I had. So to start out your initial point of attacking this deficit, this debt that we have, so you would decrease military spending, is what you're saying, and you would redirect that to Social Security and Medicaid.
um, well, I wouldn't necessarily decrease the spending, but that would be the idea in the long run. The bigger idea would be to reallocate it to, if we're going to spend it, bring it back to us or bring it back to where we're helping another country. Because we are also at budgets that are maybe a little over my mathematical intelligence level. But yeah, the idea would be to cut it back, or at least cut back on the part, the killing part, right?
Mm-hmm.
And get the budget balanced, get what we're spending there, make sure it's taking care of the United States first. you know, to just say I'm just gonna cut defense right out. Well, that doesn't even necessarily go with some of my other, you know, personal philosophies, um, to just outright cut defense. But my whole idea in general with all of it is just reform, um, in all of government, uh, because we have the pieces in place. We have, you know, we have the critical thought. There's no reason we can't simplify and uh, consolidate our government to where it's functioning and helping the people and putting money in our pocket and putting our country back in the black and the green instead of in a deficit or in just absolute debt. Like $33 trillion. That's insane. That's so dumb.
You just said something there. You talked about, is it possible to reform the current state of the government that we're in? You seem to suggest that it's possible. I would argue that you would have to get rid of parts of the government.
Yeah.
I think that the government needs to be shrunk. But you say that it's reformable. Like how so? How is it possible for us to reform the government the way it is right now?
Well, that's part of the reform, is what you're saying. Like shrinking it, is one part of the reform, right? Um, Another part of the reform would be just like listening to people's suggestions. As stupid as that sounds, you're like, wait, that doesn't happen in the government. Well, anybody that's been in the military or worked for the government is laughing right now because they're like, no, it doesn't. um, so, and that's all I mean by reform. And it's like, I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel with money, um, and backing. I'm just trying to get away from things that are toxic to the human race. Um, you know, because it's an okay system. Um, you know, it's been manipulated a lot in a lot of people's favors, but I think you're also at the point, the people that are at the top of this, like there's so many zeros at the end of your wealth, like it doesn't even, like you who cares? I don't really care. Like, congratulations, you beat the game, you're a fucking trillionaire. Like, I don't care. Most people that I've seen that are like trillionaires and billionaires, I could pick up and throw. So I, who cares? Well, whoop-de-doo, you got all the money. Like, let's focus on like making life enjoyable for everybody else. Like, who cares how rich you are? I don't care.
Yeah, but I guess I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but is
Yeah.
that somewhat contradictory? You say that the system is relatively okay. I guess you're referring to capitalism because that's what we live under.
No, I'm referring to modern money mechanics, like just how
Okay.
money's borrowed and lended, and like the concept of it. Like, I'm not gonna do much better than that, but it's the manipulators and then the consumerism, more so than capitalism, the consumerism, which just has people relying on the dollar so much. Um,
And
I
you don't
think
think
that,
that that's part of capitalism?
well, it is, but like that, I'm just trying to kind of pinpoint what I think is like the root of the problem. And it's the consumerism. It's the over, um, just that's the part of capitalism that's toxic, is the consumerism, that constant need for something new, need to, you know, nothing wrong with inventing something new, but constantly trying to get people to buy something new, to throw out the thing they already had, even if it works perfectly fine, and get a new one. That's the problem with capitalism, um,
Mhm.
is the consumerism, and a lot of that does fall back on the people themselves. But you know, if you know, we could just teach ourselves better in the first place. So
It's just and I'm not trying to be cynical, but I'm just trying to understand because I would like to think that I think on terms of monetary policy relatively sound. Um, I think there's a misconception that people who share, I guess, my worldview, because we all get labeled for wrong
right,
reasons. Erroneously, we get labeled. If you have socialistic leanings or anarchy, anarcho leanings, people will automatically assume that you don't know about the economy, that you don't care about the economy. That's not true whatsoever. The biggest difference I think between people who tend to be more left libertarian or anarchist and left versus people who are the right side of the spectrum that's anarchical, or they have tendencies that kind of go away from mainstream conservatism, mainstream liberalism. I think we argue over what parts of government do we emphasize, what parts do we take out. I don't think any of us want to add more to government. Like
Yeah,
government's already huge. Like we need to find a way
yeah.
to make it more efficient.
Move everything around. Yeah.
But I may emphasize healthcare more,
Hmm.
student debt more, and a libertarian might emphasize something else more. But
Right.
regardless, it's like I don't think that's worth arguing over right now. But this is important because you made an argument in the document. You have a document linked to your monetary policy on your Gavin Bonney site,
Mhm.
which is accessible through his Twitter handle. And I'm going to link his Twitter handle, Mr. Gavin Bonney's Twitter handle, and his Google Doc, which is where you can find all of his policy information at the end of the episode description of this episode 68. If you go, I believe it's on the New Deal, it's one of your tabs where you talk about monetary policy. I read the document and you
Yeah.
said you brought up trillionaires and billionaires, but isn't that a problem? You blame the consumer, but yet you admit in the same document that you have posted on your site that there's a problem with money just being static. So
Yeah.
you only have so much money supply that's available. Even if we take out the printing money part of it, if you have a small elite group of people hoarding all the money, how's that not going to create a set of problems? Don't you want the money flowing?
Yeah. No, you do. I think you might be. Let's see. Let me scroll here for a second. I'm trying to understand the question a little better.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
guess what I'm getting at is the consumerism line to me doesn't make much sense because if you base it on the statistic that you're reading to me, the $36,000 median income, that's talking about basically any household, like that's all
mhm.
the money on average. So what money does the consumer even have? Is it actual real money at that point? Or is this
Right.
credit
It's not a
included?
lot. Some of
Like,
it
do they
is.
even have the money? Like, can we even blame the consumer? Do they even have money to spend?
Right. And that's, I mean, and that's all kind of covered in the where the unfunded debt and interest. So that's all your student loans and your credit card debts and things like that. That's all the math on that. Um, what my thing about consumerism is actually just totally basically environmental. Um, like to get back to it, it's literally the consumerism that is the problem, not necessarily the spending money, the exchanging of money, but the um, you know, instead of keeping a car for 25 years, buying a new car every 5 years. That creates inflation, that creates debt, it creates waste, because people aren't taking care of their stuff. Um, that's more what I mean by that when I say consumerism is like the pinpointed problem with capitalism. Obviously, you need people spending money to keep your economy going in a fractional reserve system. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So explain
yeah.
that. I was going to get to that question because the main premise talks about the fractional reserve system that we have. So what do you mean when you say fractional reserve system to the audience?
So a fractional reserve banking system. This is gonna be hard for me to explain. I posted the link. It's you borrow money from a private bank at an agreed debt that you're going to pay back, right? So that money is essentially backed by the debt, and then you have to pay the debt back for the rest of the money to exist. That's essentially a fractional reserve banking system, and how that works out in a lot of this tax stuff is um, you the interest on the money that we borrow. So the fiscal year, they borrow all this money to put into the system or to send for aid or whatever, right? That's borrowed at interest. Um, the rate of taxes that we're paying right now doesn't cover the interest. That's why we have a deficit where the national debt is going up. That's how fractional reserve banking works in a nutshell.